Good evening, and welcome to tonight's story. My name is Jeremy, and it's my pleasure to guide you into a peaceful night of rest. Tonight, we'll journey to a quiet lake surrounded by mountains, where the air is thick with mystery, and the stillness hides whispers of the unknown. It's a story of solitude, discovery, and the fragile line between trust and fear. Before we begin, take a moment to settle into your space. Feel the surface beneath you, the soft bed, the familiar chair, or wherever you've chosen to rest. Let the weight of your body sink deeper into comfort, releasing the day's tension bit by bit. Close your eyes if you'd like, and picture a vast, calm lake under a silver moon. The water is so still it mirrors the night sky perfectly, as if there is no surface at all, just two skies touching. Gentle waves lap against the shore, their rhythm slow and steady, like the soft breath of the earth itself. Now, let's take a deep breath together. Inhale and exhale. Feel the cool air around you, fresh and grounding, as if you're standing on the shore of that lake. With each breath, let go of the busyness of the day. Let the sounds of the lake replace the noise in your mind. Picture yourself in this valley, lush, quiet, and untouched by time. To your left, there's a small cabin nestled against the trees, its windows glowing softly with golden light. To your right, across the still waters of the lake, is another house, a shadowy figure against the night sky, faintly illuminated by a flickering light. This is where our story begins. The House on the Lake. Maya arrived at the cabin just as the sun was setting behind the ridge, its last rays painting the lake in hues of orange and gold. She parked her car in the gravel driveway and stepped out, stretching after the long drive. The air smelled clean, tinged with pine and earth, and the silence was almost unnerving after the constant hum of city life. She was here to escape, or at least that's what she told herself. A month in a lakeside cabin was exactly what she needed. Her sister had insisted. Time to clear her head, to leave behind the noise and chaos that had been clawing at her ever since. Well, ever since everything fell apart. The cabin was small but cozy, with warm wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, and wide windows that overlooked the lake. After unpacking, Maya made herself a cup of tea and settled into the armchair by the window, watching as the last light faded from the sky. The lake grew darker, its surface turning to glass under the rising moon. And then, just as she was about to turn away, she noticed it. A faint flicker of light from the house across the water. It was brief, barely more than a pulse, but it caught her attention. She leaned closer to the window, squinting into the darkness. The house across the lake was supposed to be abandoned. The owner of the cabin had told her so when she booked the place. No one had lived there in decades. But there it was again, a faint, flickering light. Maya felt a chill creep up her spine, though she couldn't say why. It was probably nothing, she told herself. A reflection, maybe, or a trick of the moonlight. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. Maya tore her gaze away from the window and shook her head, chastising herself for letting her imagination run wild. She'd come here to escape distractions, not create new ones. With a sigh, she turned off the lamp by her chair, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the window. She climbed into bed, the soft creak of the mattress echoing in the stillness. Outside, the lake remained calm, its surface rippling faintly in the night breeze. Despite the serenity of her surroundings, sleep didn't come easily. The image of the flickering light lingered in her mind, tugging at her curiosity. Who would be in that house? And why would they keep it so dark, with just a single light showing? When she finally drifted off, her dreams were restless, fragmented images of water, of shadows moving just beyond her reach, of a man's voice she didn't recognize whispering her name. The next morning, the lake was bright and glassy, the sunlight reflecting off its surface in a dazzling display. Maya shook off the unease of the night before as she sipped her coffee on the porch, watching a heron glide silently over the water. But as her gaze drifted across the lake, her stomach tightened. The house was there, just as she remembered it, dark and imposing, its weathered facade standing in stark contrast to the vibrant landscape around it. "I'll just row over," she muttered to herself, as if saying it aloud would make it more reasonable. She had noticed the small rowboat tied to the cabin's dock when she arrived, and now the idea of using it to satisfy her curiosity seemed less absurd than spending another night imagining what she might find. An hour later, she was standing on the dock, gripping the worn oars of the rowboat. The lake was calm, its surface rippling gently as she pushed off, the boat gliding easily through the water. As she approached the house, the details came into sharper focus. The windows were mostly shuttered, their frames warped and peeling. The front porch sagged slightly, its boards gray and splintered from years of neglect. Yet, despite its weathered appearance, the house didn't feel abandoned. Maya tied the boat to a post on the shore and stepped onto the rocky bank. The air felt heavier here, as though the house itself was watching her approach. She climbed the short path to the porch, each step echoing in the unnatural quiet. When she reached the door, she hesitated. Should she knock? Call out? Before she could decide, the door opened a crack and a man stepped out. He was tall, his features sharp and angular, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in an unruly wave. His clothes were simple, a white shirt and dark trousers, but there was something about him that seemed out of place, as though he belonged to a different time. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. "I, saw the light last night," Maya stammered, suddenly feeling foolish. "I didn't think anyone lived here." The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. "Not many do," he said. "I'm Reed, and you are?" "Maya," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I'm staying at the cabin across the lake." "I know," he said simply. Her breath caught. "You know?" Reed's smile didn't waver. "I saw you arrive yesterday. The lake doesn't have many visitors this time of year. You stand out." There was something unsettling about his words, but Maya couldn't decide if it was his tone or her own nerves playing tricks on her. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said, taking a small step back. "You're not intruding," Reed said quickly, his expression softening. "In fact, I'm glad you came. Most people don't." Maya frowned. "Why not?" Reed hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the lake. "Because most people don't like what they find here." Maya's unease deepened at his words, but curiosity kept her rooted to the spot. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Reed's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he stepped aside, gesturing toward the open door. "Why don't you come in? It's easier to explain inside." She hesitated, glancing back at the lake where her rowboat bobbed gently in the shallows. The cabin across the water seemed far away now, almost like it belonged to another life. But something about Reed, his calm demeanor, the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets just out of reach, pulled her forward. She stepped over the threshold, and the air inside the house was cool and still, carrying a faint scent of wood smoke and something sweeter she couldn't quite place. The interior was sparse but not entirely empty. A few pieces of furniture, an old armchair, a battered table, sat in the dim light filtering through the cracked shutters. Reed closed the door behind her and motioned to a chair by the fireplace. "Sit, if you'd like." Maya obeyed, lowering herself onto the edge of the chair. Reed remained standing, leaning casually against the wall. "So," she said, forcing her voice to remain light, "what's the story with this place? Why does everyone think it's abandoned?" Reed's expression turned thoughtful, as though he were deciding how much to tell her. "It was abandoned," he said finally, "for a long time, but some places don't stay empty forever." "That's cryptic," Maya said, her brow furrowing. "Do you live here alone?" Reed's smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I do now." The words sent a chill through her, but before she could ask him to elaborate, he moved toward the fireplace where a small stack of logs sat untouched. He knelt to arrange them, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Why did you come here, Maya?" he asked without looking up. The question caught her off guard. "I told you. I saw the light. I was curious." "No," Reed said, his voice quiet but firm. "Why did you come to the lake?" Maya stiffened, her fingers curling against the armrests of the chair. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," Reed replied, striking a match and setting it to the wood. The fire caught quickly, flames licking hungrily at the dry logs. The lake doesn't just bring people here by accident. It has a way of calling to those who are running from something. "I'm not running from anything," Maya said, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Reed stood, brushing his hands on his trousers. "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unanswerable. Maya looked away, her eyes falling on a small, ornate box sitting on the mantel. The wood was dark and polished, its surface inlaid with delicate carvings of twisting vines and stars. "What's that?" she asked, grateful for the distraction. Reed followed her gaze, his expression darkening slightly. "It's a piece of the lake's story," he said. "And maybe yours, too." Before she could press him further, he crossed the room and picked up the box, holding it out to her. "If you really want answers," he said, his voice low, "you'll find them here." Maya stared at the box, the air around her seeming to grow heavier. "What's inside?" she whispered. Reed's lips twitched into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Open it and find out." Maya hesitated, her eyes locked on the box. The carvings seemed to shimmer faintly in the firelight, the twisting vines almost alive under her gaze. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, but she couldn't bring herself to look away. "What happens if I open it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Reed tilted his head, watching her carefully. "That depends," he said. "Sometimes the truth sets you free. Sometimes it does the opposite. The weight of his words sent a shiver down her spine, but curiosity pushed her forward. Slowly, she reached out and took the box from his hands. It was heavier than she expected, its surface cool and smooth beneath her fingertips. "Why give it to me?" she asked, glancing up at him. "Because you're here," Reed said simply, "and because it belongs to you now." The cryptic answer didn't sit well with her, but she didn't press him further. Instead, she set the box in her lap and ran her fingers along the edges, finding a small latch hidden among the carvings. With a deep breath, she flipped it open. The lid lifted smoothly, revealing a strange collection of items inside. A piece of fabric, faded and torn, a silver locket, its chain tangled, and a bundle of old photographs tied together with a strip of black ribbon. The photographs were the first thing she reached for, her fingers trembling slightly as she untied the ribbon. The top photograph was of the lake, its surface calm and reflective. But as she flipped to the next one, her heart stopped. It was her cabin, exactly as it looked now, down to the weathered shutters and the small dock jutting into the water. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" Reed asked, his voice steady but distant. Maya glanced at him, her mind racing. "How old are these?" "Old," he said. "Older than you think." Her fingers fumbled as she flipped through the rest of the photographs. They were all of the lake and its surroundings. Trees, the shore, even the house she was now sitting in. But the final photo made her blood run cold. It was of a woman standing on the dock, her back to the camera, her figure illuminated by the glow of a lantern. The woman was wearing Maya's coat. "This is a joke," she said, her voice shaking. "This can't be real." "It's not a joke," Reed said, stepping closer. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something deeper, something unreadable. The lake has a way of holding on to things, people, moments. It's not always clear why. "What does it want from me?" Maya asked, clutching the photograph tightly. Reed knelt beside her, his face inches from hers. "It doesn't want anything," he said softly. "It's you who has to decide what you want." The room felt colder now, the fire's warmth unable to reach her. Maya looked back at the box, her pulse pounding in her ears. "What happens if I leave?" she asked. Reed's gaze didn't waver. "You can leave," he said, "but the lake never forgets." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time Maya felt truly trapped, not by Reed or the house, but by something much larger, much older, and far beyond her understanding. Maya placed the photograph back in the box, her fingers trembling. The fire crackled faintly in the background, but the warmth didn't reach her. Every instinct told her to get out, to run back to the cabin, to row away from this house and never look back. But something else, deeper and quieter, urged her to stay. "What do you mean the lake never forgets?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Reed sat back on his heels, his expression shadowed by the flickering firelight. "The lake remembers everyone who's touched it," he said. "Every secret it's kept, every loss it's carried. It doesn't demand anything, but it doesn't let go easily either." "That's ridiculous," Maya said, though the words rang hollow. "It's just water." "Is it?" Reed asked, his voice calm, almost amused. "Do you really believe that?" Maya opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. She glanced down at the box again, her eyes settling on the silver locket nestled among the other objects. Carefully, she picked it up, the cool metal sending a chill through her fingers. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside was a photograph of her face unmistakable, though the clothing and hairstyle were wrong, like something out of another era. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. How is this possible? She whispered. Reed's expression softened, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Pity, maybe, or regret. The lake shows you what it knows, he said. And sometimes what it knows is more than you're ready for. Maya clenched her fists, her heart pounding. What aren't you telling me? She demanded, her voice rising. Why do you keep talking in riddles? What does this place want from me? Reed stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. I told you, he said. It doesn't want anything. It's you who has to decide, whether you're ready to face what the lake has shown you, or whether you'll keep running. Running from what? Maya snapped, though she already knew the answer. She had been running from the memories of a life she'd tried to leave behind, running from the grief she hadn't allowed herself to feel, running from the choices she couldn't undo. Her breath came fast and shallow as the weight of it all pressed down on her. Why me? She asked, her voice breaking. Why did it choose me? Reed moved closer, his voice low and steady. The lake doesn't choose, he said. It reflects. It's showing you what's already inside. The words hit her like a wave, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Her mind reeled as fragments of memories she'd buried deep began to surface. Her father's laughter on the dock when she was a child. The soft hum of the lake at twilight. The last time she saw her sister before the argument that tore them apart. And then another memory, sharper and more recent, rose unbidden. A night much like this one, a storm raging over the water, and a pair of headlights cutting through the darkness. She remembered the cold grip of the steering wheel, the way the road had blurred, and the sound of the lake swallowing everything whole. Her hands flew to her mouth as the truth slammed into her. I've been here before, she whispered. Haven't I? Reed nodded, his expression unreadable. You have, he said. And now you have to decide if you'll let the lake keep you, or if you'll let it set you free. Maya stumbled back, the weight of Reed's words pressing down on her chest like an anchor. The memories were clearer now, cutting through the fog of denial she had wrapped herself in for so long. The crash, the water, the silence that followed. Her knees buckled, and she sank into the chair, clutching the locket in her trembling hands. I didn't think I'd survive, she whispered. I shouldn't have survived. Reed crouched in front of her, his expression calm but resolute. But you did, and that's why you're here. The lake doesn't bring people back without a reason. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at him. Why didn't it let me go? Why now? Reed's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something vulnerable behind his composed exterior. Because you weren't ready, he said, but now you are. That's why you saw the light. That's why you came here. Maya shook her head, the tears spilling over. I don't know if I can face it. The guilt, the choices I made, everything I lost. You can, Reed said firmly, his voice steady. You already are. She stared at him, her breathing ragged. And what about you? She asked. Why are you here? Reed hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because the lake doesn't just hold on to people who are running," he said. "It holds on to people who are waiting." "Waiting for what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For someone like you," he said simply. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Maya searched his face, trying to understand the depth of his connection to this place and to her. Slowly, realization dawned. "You're not just here because of the lake," she said. "You're part of it, aren't you?" Reed's lips curved into a faint smile, tinged with both sadness and acceptance. "I am," he said. "I've been here longer than I can remember, watching, waiting, helping people find their way. But I think you might be the last person I need to help." Maya's heart clenched. "What happens when you're done?" she asked. "I don't know," Reed admitted. "Maybe I'll finally get to leave, too." The thought filled her with an ache she couldn't quite name. She reached out, her hand brushing against his. "I don't want to lose you," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "You won't," Reed said softly. "I'll always be part of the lake, and you'll always be part of it too, whether you stay or leave. But you don't have to be afraid anymore, Maya. You can let go." Her breath hitched as his words settled over her. Letting go felt impossible, but holding on had been tearing her apart. Slowly, she turned back to the box in her lap, lifting the photograph of the woman on the dock. She studied it, her fingers tracing the edges, and then she released it into the fire. The flames crackled as the photograph curled and blackened, its image fading into ash. Maya felt a strange lightness, as though a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally lifted. She looked at Reed, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now. "For everything." He smiled, his expression warm and peaceful. "You found your way," he said. "That's all I wanted." The fire burned brighter for a moment, casting the room in golden light, and when Maya blinked, Reed was gone. The house was empty, silent except for the soft whisper of the lake outside. Maya stood, her legs steady beneath her, and stepped out onto the porch. The lake stretched before her, calm and endless, the first rays of dawn painting the water in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace, not because the pain was gone, but because she finally understood it. She climbed into the rowboat, untied it from the shore, and began to row back to the cabin. The lake's surface rippled gently under the oars, carrying her forward. As she reached the dock, she looked back at the house across the lake. The light in the window flickered once, like a farewell, and then faded into the morning mist. Maya smiled, a quiet certainty settling in her chest. She would carry the lake's memory with her, but this time she wouldn't let it hold her back.